My name is Mark Holloway. I'm 54. I've worked most of my life with my hands. Contracting, plumbing, electrical. The kind of work where no one thanks you until something stops working. And even then, the gratitude is short. Conditional. I used to think families were different. It was the Friday before my stepson's wedding. The venue was nestled up in the Colorado foothills, one of those ranch-style estates they rent out for corporate retreats and overpriced ceremonies. Timber framing, fairy lights, barrels posed as cocktail tables. All of it meant to look humble while bleeding you dry behind the scenes. Laura said it was worth it. A once-in-a-lifetime thing, she kept repeating. You only get married once. I didn't have the heart to remind her that this was her second. My first. I've always held on to things longer than most men do. Even pain. Brent, my stepson, was 27. A little too proud of his hair, a little too proud of his suit. He'd grown into a man in age only. There was still that thin layer of entitlement behind every smile. The same one he had when I first met him at 16. Slouched in the passenger seat of Laura's old Corolla. Earbuds in, face blank, silently daring me to try and belong. Back then, I thought I could win him over. I showed up to his soccer games. Helped with late-night essays. Bought his first used car after his real dad forgot to call on his birthday. I gave him my time, my money, and the years I'll never get back. He gave me silence. And when he did speak, it was usually to correct, to roll his eyes, to say, "That's not how Dad does it." But still I stayed. Still I paid. So there we were. Rehearsal afternoon. The photographer was barking orders. Bridesmaids were pretending to care. Groomsmen in sunglasses leaned against a split-rail fence like they were in a whiskey ad. I stood off to the side near the bar, watching it all play out like a scene I hadn't been cast in. No one told me where to stand. No one asked if I'd like to say a few words. I wasn't walking anyone down any aisle. Laura, in her pale blue dress, fluttered from person to person like a dragonfly on the surface of a lake. Beautiful, untouchable. She didn't look at me much. And then I heard it. Brent was standing near the altar, his tie loose, his sleeves rolled up like he wanted to look casual for the photos. His fiancée, Amber, was fussing with the boutonniere on his lapel. He turned to one of his groomsmen, a wiry guy in loafers who'd introduced himself to me as Dez. And with that signature smirk, Brent said, "Relax, they're just wallets." Laughter. Casual, careless, cruel. A few of them high-fived. One of the bridesmaids chuckled without looking up from her phone. Amber didn't say a word. She didn't even look surprised. Brent didn't check to see if I heard. He didn't need to. He assumed I hadn't. Or worse, he assumed I had and that it didn't matter. I didn't react. I just stood there, my drink warming in my hand, my mouth suddenly dry, my breath slow and even like I was walking the edge of a cliff. I didn't turn, didn't glance at Laura, didn't say a word. Because what do you say to something like that? Nothing. Not in that moment. Not when the tables are set and the music is cued and the photographer is circling the room like a shark smelling money. You take note. That's all. You take note of what you are in this family. Not a man. Not a father. Not even a presence. You're a resource. A number at the bottom of an invoice. And when your usefulness runs dry, so does your identity. That was the moment it all crystallized. All the little slights. All the jokes whispered behind my back. The dinners where Brent toasted his real family. The birthdays where I got a text 2 days late, if at all. The way Laura would say, "He's still adjusting." Even 10 years after I paid his first tuition bill. He wasn't adjusting. He had made a decision. And that day, standing under the warm glow of string lights I had paid to hang, he said it out loud. Not in those words, but clearly enough. I was never going to be anything more than a wallet. I thought about all the moments I had let pass. The first time he called me Mark, instead of Dad, in front of his friends. The time he lost his job and moved back in for 6 months. Never offered to help around the house. Never said thank you when I covered his credit card debt to stop the calls. The time he gave Amber a necklace for Christmas and told everyone he finally got to treat her for once. Even though the charge had come through my account. I thought maybe, just maybe, a wedding would change something. That in building his own family, Brent might finally see what I had done for his. That he might reach for my hand during the toast and say, "I couldn't have done this without you." But no. Instead, I got a 5-word epitaph. "They're just wallets." That's what I was to him. And if that's what I was to him, then what did that make Laura? What did that make this entire marriage? Maybe I was a fool. Maybe I always had been. I watched Brent laugh and sip champagne, his suit perfectly tailored, the future wide open in front of him like a credit line. I watched his friends, the ones I'd helped move across states, the ones I'd fed and driven and bailed out. They laughed too. Not because they agreed with him, maybe they didn't, but because it was easy. Because that's what people do when they believe the person being mocked won't fight back. And they were right. I didn't fight. I didn't shout. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't ruin the evening. I just made a decision. Not a loud one. Not one anyone would notice at first. But a final one. A decision that began not in anger, but in silence. The kind of silence you hear when something inside you dies. The kind of silence that sounds like peace. I stepped out into the hallway. The room behind me kept spinning. Music, laughter, the clink of glassware. Brent was still holding court, arms outstretched like he was preaching to disciples, the king of his own rented kingdom. I moved slowly, deliberately, my dress shoes thudding softly against the polished floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, dimly lit by fake sconces meant to look like wrought iron. I passed a table where someone had left a clipboard with catering forms and vendor contacts, pages of invoices, line items, balances due. For a moment I just stared at them. It's a strange thing watching your life reduced to receipts. But that's what it had become. What I had become. A means to an end. Payment plan in a suit. Not a man. Not a father. Just another resource waiting to be depleted. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and scrolled until I found the name. A number I hadn't dialed in nearly 2 years. Not because we weren't on good terms, we were, but because I hadn't needed to remind anyone of the power I still held. The line rang once, then again. He picked up on the third. "Mark." I didn't explain. I didn't say hello. My voice was low, calm. "It's time. Pull it." There was a pause, a long breath on the other end. Then a single word. "Understood." I hung up. No threats. No drama. Just the truth, finally spoken in action instead of words. And once it was done, I slid the phone back into my pocket and walked back toward the rehearsal as if nothing had changed. Because nothing had changed, not yet. The lie was still intact. The music was still playing. Laura was laughing with Amber's mother. Her wine glass tilted at an angle that said she wasn't listening to anything, just pretending to agree. Brent didn't even glance in my direction. I could have been the valet. I could have been the guy checking the thermostats. That's how invisible I'd become. The officiant called for another run-through. Someone joked about doing it like a football formation. I stood near the back and watched it all unfold. The fake smiles, the brittle rehearsals, the arrogance of people who believe the future owes them something. And then the lights flickered. Just once. Barely noticeable. The sound system, mid-song, stuttered. A soft crackle of feedback. Then silence. At first, everyone assumed it was a glitch. The planner, a woman in an all-black pantsuit with a clipboard permanently attached to her hand, rushed to the soundboard, whispering frantic commands to a teenager with a headset. The kid looked pale. He started unplugging cables and plugging them back in, sweat darkening his armpits. Brent shouted something about the speakers. One of the bridesmaids laughed nervously. Laura glanced around, confused but still smiling, the way you do when you think things are under control. Then the venue manager appeared. He was mid-30s, overdressed, trying to look like he wasn't panicking. He walked straight up to the planner and leaned in to whisper, but I could hear it. Everyone close enough could. "There's a problem with the contract." The planner's face dropped. "What kind of problem?" "System says it's been suspended. All associated payments flagged. We're trying to get support on the line, but..." He stopped when he saw me. I didn't move. I didn't nod. I didn't smirk. Just met his eyes and held them until he looked away. Now it was real. The caterers began to murmur. One of them checked their phone, then started packing up trays. The florist whispered to her assistant, who immediately began pulling centerpieces back off the tables. And then, in the space of 5 minutes, the illusion cracked. The music didn't return. The planner excused herself, walking briskly toward the entrance with her phone to her ear, her voice rising. Laura finally broke from her conversation and made her way to me. Confusion etched across her face. "Mark, what's happening?" I said nothing, just handed her my phone. The screen was open to the shared account dashboard. The wedding fund. The one I'd been funneling money into for over a year. Dozens of transfers. All from me. None from Brent. None from her. Just a steady outpouring from one man's labor. At the bottom of the screen, account closed. Authorization revoked. She stared at it for a long moment, blinked, looked up at me like I was speaking another language. "Why?" she whispered. I leaned in, quiet, direct. "Because he called me a wallet." Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted toward Brent, who was now arguing with the sound technician while Amber stood nearby, trying to pretend nothing was wrong. The guests were starting to notice. Voices rising. Phones lighting up. Someone asked if this was part of the rehearsal. Laura turned back to me. "He didn't mean it." "He said it," I replied. "That's all I needed." She looked like she wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Not really, because she'd heard the tone. She'd seen the way Brent looked through me for years, the way he shrugged off my efforts, minimized my presence. She just never thought I'd do anything about it. Most men don't. Most men swallow it, endure it, keep showing up with their checkbooks and their lowered heads, hoping that one day, finally, someone will say thank you. But not me. Not anymore. The planner returned, face flushed, voice clipped. "We have a situation," she announced. "The venue contract is temporarily invalid. Until the payment issue is resolved, we're unable to proceed." Brent turned on her. "What do you mean invalid? We've been planning this for months." She gestured helplessly. "Your payment profile is linked to a corporate cosigner. That cosigner revoked their authorization this afternoon, which means technically and legally this space is no longer reserved." Brent's eyes widened. "That's not possible. It was just working. This morning it was working." The planner hesitated, then turned to me. "Mr. Holloway?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence was answer enough. Amber stepped forward, her voice tight and saccharine. "Maybe we can just pay the difference now. I have my dad's card. We can cover it." The venue manager cut her off. "I'm sorry. Until the system clears the flagged account, no new contracts can be initiated. It's a risk issue." Laura turned to me. "You're punishing him on the eve of his wedding." "No," I said. "I'm correcting a mistake, one I've made for years." The whisper network started moving, guests pulling each other aside, people checking their calendars, their hotel bookings, wondering if they'd wasted their time. Brent looked like a man watching the scaffolding of his future collapse in real time. He opened his mouth, eyes locked on me. "What the hell did you do?" I stepped closer. "I gave you exactly what you asked for," I said. "You said I was just a wallet. Now you get to find out what happens when the wallet closes." The color drained from his face. Amber turned to him, whispering fast, panicked. The planner looked like she wanted to disappear. The best man, Des, stepped in then. "Okay, this is getting out of hand. Can we all just take a breath?" I stared him down. "You were laughing too, remember?" His mouth clamped shut. And just like that, the rehearsal was over. That night, the silence in the car was thick. Laura sat in the passenger seat with her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the mountains in the distance. The last bit of sun was draining out of the sky, the peaks stained with burnt orange and indifference. She hadn't said a word since we left the venue. I didn't speak either. I didn't owe the silence an explanation. But eventually she broke. "You embarrassed him," she said. No anger, just a flat kind of disbelief. In front of everyone, I kept my hands on the wheel. He earned it. You could have talked to him. Privately. No. Because privately he would have smiled and brushed it off. Just a joke. Just a misunderstanding. But that's the problem. Nothing ever lands with him unless it has a price. She turned, eyes narrowing. So what, you're teaching him a lesson? That what, love is conditional. That if he doesn't bow to you, you take everything back? I laughed once. Quiet. Love is free. Respect isn't. She didn't like that answer. She looked away. Her lip trembled for half a second. Not grief. Not regret. Frustration. Frustration that I had finally stopped doing what she'd grown used to. Absorbing the damage. Back home, I poured myself a drink while she paced the kitchen. The walls felt closer than usual. The light over the sink flickered. You didn't have to go nuclear, she said. It's just, he jokes like that with his friends. It doesn't mean anything. It means something to me. Laura walked to the table, sat down slowly. Her shoulders sagged, like she was folding in on herself. I know he's not always kind, she said. I know he has blind spots, but he's under pressure. The wedding, the expectations. He's stressed. Everyone's stressed, I said. But not everyone dehumanizes the people paying their bills. She didn't respond to that. Just stared at the floor like it might offer her a better answer than I could. Then softly she said it. We've been talking about a backup plan. My head turned. What do you mean, we? She hesitated. Brent, Amber, her father, just in case you step back. He was worried you might. Worried? He said you'd been quieter lately, that you were pulling away. I nodded once. So they made a plan to cut me out, before I even said a word. It wasn't like that. No? What was it like? Laura stood again, arms wrapping around herself. Defensive. Small. They wanted to be ready, just in case. It's their wedding mark. They were trying to feel in control. No, they were trying to get their story straight. So when the money stopped flowing, they could say, we expected this. It's fine. We don't need him. She didn't deny it. And that silence told me everything. They'd been planning around me for months. Not just financially, emotionally, strategically, treating me like a dying star whose gravity they needed to navigate until it blinked out. Laura finally sat again. This time, her voice was quieter, almost ashamed. They thought you might walk away eventually, because they were already planning to walk away from me, I said. They just wanted to do it after they cashed the final check. Her voice cracked. It wasn't about money. I stared at her. We both know that's not true. The next morning, the calls started. First, it was Brent. Straight to voicemail. Then Amber. Her voice syrupy. Forced cheerfulness seeping through every syllable. Hey Mark. There's just a little glitch with the venue, no big deal, we're handling it. But if you could give us a quick call back. I didn't. Then Laura's phone began buzzing. Amber again. Then her father, the man who hadn't paid for a single napkin but had the gall to say at the engagement dinner. We're so lucky to have Mark. He's the foundation of this family. Foundation. Like concrete. Like something you build on and forget. Laura listened to their voicemails on speaker. They were polite at first. Hopeful. But with each missed return call, the tone shifted. Concern turned to confusion. Then suspicion. Brent called again. Left a longer message. If this is about the wallet comment, I already said it was a joke. I didn't even know you heard it. Come on, don't do this. We need to talk. But I didn't need to talk. Because talking is how I ended up here in the first place. Years of explaining myself to people who'd already decided what I was worth. I went to work that day like nothing had happened. Changed the oil in the truck. Picked up a shipment of supplies for a contractor friend. Ate lunch in silence. No drama. No chaos. Just a man taking back control of a life that had been leased out one payment at a time. But when I came home, Laura was waiting at the door. They can't rebook, she said. The other venues are full. Too close to the date. The caterer says the deposit can't be reapplied. The photographer has someone else scheduled for that day now. I shrugged. They'll figure it out. Her voice tightened. You don't care. I did, I said, for a long time, but caring alone isn't enough when you're just the funding department. She stepped closer. They're family. No, they're your family. I was just a convenient wallet that showed up for the hard parts. Her face twisted. That's not fair. I stared at her. Let the weight of her own silence press down. You never corrected him, I said. Never once. Not when he rolled his eyes at me at Christmas. Not when he joked that I couldn't handle being a real dad. Not when he said, right in front of you, that I should be grateful to even be included. You didn't step in. You just let it happen. She looked down at her hands. He's your son, she said, as if that were an excuse. And I was the man who paid for your son's future. But he never gave me a name or a role or a place at the table. There was a pause. Then Laura whispered. He said you were acting strange the last few months. Distant. Like you were pulling away. Because I was tired, I said. Tired of pretending that being a provider made me part of something. Tired of paying admission to a family that never saw me as more than a donor. She sank onto the couch. The room was dim. The only light coming through the curtains was the soft gray of an overcast sky. No warmth, just haze. Then she said something that froze me in place. He's already applied for a wedding loan. I turned. What? Amber's father helped him. They've been discussing it since March. That was 3 months ago. 3 months before Brent ever said thank you. 3 months before he looked me in the eye at dinner and told me he was so glad I was part of the family. A rehearsed line, a distraction. So the truth was worse than I imagined. This wasn't just entitlement. It was premeditated. A contingency. A way to smile in my face while plotting how to live without me the second it stopped being convenient. And even now, they still wanted my help. Still expected a call back. A deposit reinstated. A man who had been insulted, sidelined, and used to come crawling back with his wallet in hand. I didn't. Instead, I pulled out the last receipts. The catering contract. The venue schedule. The balance statements. I printed them. Highlighted the charges that had come from my personal account. I left them on the kitchen table. When Laura asked why, I answered plainly. So no one pretends this was ever mutual. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was second-guessing myself. Not because I felt guilt. I didn't. That part of me. The man who waited for scraps, for eye contact, for some gesture of earned belonging. He'd been buried the moment Brent opened his mouth and called me a wallet. What kept me up was the stillness. The strange, heavy quiet that settles after a fault line ruptures. It wasn't peace exactly. It was clarity, cold and final. Like standing in the ruins of something you built with your bare hands and realizing you don't want to rebuild it anymore. By morning, Laura was already dressed. Makeup on. Her expression brittle. He wants to meet, she said. Brent. Just you and him. No Amber. No audience. I poured coffee, said nothing. He says he wants to apologize. I stirred in silence. Let the clink of the spoon fill the space where my trust used to be. He's your son, Mark. I looked up. No, he's not. He never was. And he made that perfectly clear. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but said nothing more. We met at a diner. One of those places with sticky menus and mugs that never empty. Brent had chosen it neutral ground, I assumed. A place where nobody could raise their voice without getting stared down by 3 old men at the counter and a waitress who'd seen every kind of family meltdown known to man. He was already seated when I arrived. No tie, no jacket, just a hoodie and jeans and the faint panic of a man whose safety net had vanished. Mark, he said, tried to smile. Thanks for meeting me. I nodded once, sat across from him, didn't touch the menu. He cleared his throat. Look, I know things got messed up, and I wanted to say I'm sorry. I raised an eyebrow. For what? He blinked. I mean the wallet thing. That was out of line. It was a dumb joke. No, it was an honest one, I said. You said what you believed. You just didn't think I'd hear it. He hesitated. Okay, fine. It was still wrong. Not wrong, I said. Just honest. That's why it cut so deep. He looked away, mouth tight. I didn't mean it like that. But you meant it, I replied. That's the part you're afraid to say out loud. You meant it, Brent. Because somewhere in your mind, I've never been more than the guy who kept the lights on. The waitress came by. Brent ordered a coffee. I waved her off. He waited until she was gone. I was angry, stressed. The wedding's been a lot. We weren't sure if you were even going to stick with it. Amber's dad said you looked checked out lately. I leaned forward. You were already making plans without me, discussing loans, talking strategy. That wasn't about me pulling away. That was you preemptively cutting me out while still collecting. He didn't deny it. Didn't even try. Why did you come here, Brent? I asked. What did you think this would fix? He looked up then, eyes tired, voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. Because the venue won't take us back. Because the deposits are gone. Because we have 60 people flying in and nowhere to put them. Because Amber's dad can't front the whole bill and the loan didn't clear. There it was. The real apology. Not for what he said, but for the consequences. He kept going, voice rising a little. I know I've been hard on you. I get it now. I see what you've done. All those years. The school bills. The car. Even the down payment for our apartment. Amber told me. I was an idiot. I didn't see it. You saw it, I said. You just didn't care. Gratitude only matters to people who think they're below you. You thought you were above me. He shook his head. No, I didn't. I was just trying to be my own man. Stand on my own 2 feet. Standing on my back. He froze. I let the words hang between us. I'm not angry anymore, I said. I'm not hurt. What I am, Brent, is done. Done pretending. Done carrying a family that only remembers me when the check is due. He swallowed hard. So what? You're just walking away? No, I said. I walked away already. You're just now noticing the door was closed. His voice cracked. But you're the only one who can fix this. Then maybe it shouldn't be fixed. That hit him. Hard. He leaned back like I'd punched him in the ribs. You know what they said about me? I continued. Amber's parents. At the engagement dinner. They said, we're so grateful to have you. You've made all of this possible. Like I was a bank that approved their loan. Not a person. Not a father. Just a provider with a pulse. I didn't know they said that. You didn't need to. You agreed with it. He looked down, ashamed. But shame without change is nothing. It's just performance. I'm not paying for the wedding, I said. His head jerked up. I'm not negotiating. I'm not splitting costs. I'm not helping you look good in front of people who think I'm invisible. But, I cut him off. You want to get married? Good. Then figure it out. Downsize. Elope. Get creative. But not with my money. Not with my name. He was shaking now. You don't mean that. I do, I said. And I've never meant anything more. He stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe for the first time he was seeing me as a man instead of a fixture. Something with boundaries. Something that says no. The coffee arrived. He didn't touch it. I stood. Mark, wait. You said I wasn't your father, I said. So stop expecting me to act like one. And I walked out. The calls after that were frantic. Laura, Amber, her father, even her mother, who'd never spoken to me directly in 5 years, suddenly found her voice. They all said the same thing, just in different costumes. Be the bigger person. Don't punish the bride. Think of the guests. Think of the family. But no one said we're sorry. No one said we were wrong. Only, come back and clean up what we broke. I didn't answer any of them. The wedding didn't happen. Not at the venue. Not on schedule. Not with the fireworks and the champagne wall and the violinist from Aspen. They moved it to a park. Picnic tables and folding chairs. Brent wore a suit that didn't fit. Amber wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The guest list shrank by half. I didn't attend. Laura did. When she came home, her heels in her hand, mascara smudged, she sat on the couch and didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said, "It wasn't the same." I nodded. Then she whispered, "He asked about you. Said it felt wrong without you there." I looked at her. "And what did you say?" She hesitated. I said, "Actions have consequences." The silence after that was long. We both stared at the wall. Not angry, not broken. Just two people finally standing in the aftermath of a lie that had run out of room. 3 weeks passed. No contact. Then a letter arrived. From Brent. It was short, careful. Written like a resume cover letter, just enough humility to suggest he'd practiced the shape of remorse, but not the weight. He said he'd been wrong, that he was still learning, that he hoped in time we could talk. I read it once, then set it aside, because forgiveness isn't owed. And this time I wasn't giving anything I hadn't received first. The house grew quiet again. Laura moved slower, looked at me differently, like she wasn't sure what version of me she was living with now. I didn't try to reassure her. I'd spent enough years making people comfortable while they buried me under their expectations. This was who I was now. A man with limits. A man who finally said no. Because here's the truth. I gave them everything. Years. Labor. Love. Money. Identity. They called me a wallet. So I shut it. And when the dust settled, when the music died and the lights dimmed, they looked around for the man they thought would always be there. But I was already gone. So I ask you, if you were called a wallet by the boy you raised, if your sacrifices were mocked, if your presence was a convenience but never a truth, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Or would you have walked out with your dignity intact? Tell me, was I wrong? Or did I finally do the only thing a man can do when his value has been reduced to a $?